Morning, everyone. Hi. My name is Anna Fadden, and I have the pleasure of serving as a deacon to this congregation and a member of the executive team. I use she, her pronouns. I wanted to call your attention to our community matters. There's a lot of great information here. Particularly, we have a Valentine's Day family karaoke night coming up on Valentine's Day, the 14th. And there's more information here. You can check it out. That would be great. Please remember to put your electronic devices into worship mode. And our minister, Reverend Laura Hoke, has today off. Our guest preacher today is one of Laura's closest friends, the Reverend Wendy Bell. Wendy is a Unitarian Universalist minister who served congregations in eastern Massachusetts for 22 years. Some of you might recall that Wendy served the Harvard UU Church for many of those years. She is currently the executive director of a pediatric therapeutic horseback riding program in Lincoln, Massachusetts, and a candidate for a master's in mental health counseling at Lesley University. Wendy lives in Arlington with her wife and daughter and their 2 dogs. Please join me in welcoming her here today. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome to this place where empathy is not a sin, but a calling. Welcome to this place where compassion is not a crime, but an aspiration. Compassion both for ourselves and for one another. Welcome to this place where love reigns and pulls us forward along the long arcing road toward justice, where hope and kindness and joy fuel our journey. Welcome. welcome. We are glad that you are here.
I'd like to ask Natalie to please light our chalice. As our chalice is lit, please join me in the words of our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please rise as you are able for our first hymn, number 34. The words will be on the screen.
This time, I'd like to invite all the children to come up front if you'd like for a reading. I'm going to read the book Ish, written by Peter H. Reynolds. Come on, Zachary. Yay! Henry. Nah, okay. Ramon loved to draw. Anytime, anything, anywhere. One day, Ramon was drawing a vase of flowers. His brother, Leon, leaned over his shoulder. Leon was bursting out laughing. "What is that?" he asked. Ramon could not even answer. He just crumpled up the drawing and threw it across the room. Leon's daughter haunted Ramon. He kept trying to make his drawings look right, but they never did. After many months and many crumpled sheets of paper, Ramon put his pencil down. "I'm done." Marisol, his sister, was watching him. "What do you want?" he snapped. "Good morning." "I was watching you draw," she said. Ramon sneered. "I'm not drawing. Go away." Marisol ran away, but not before picking up a crumpled sheet of paper. "Hey, come back with that!" Ramon raced after Marisol up the hall and into her room. He was about to yell, but fell silent when he saw his sister's walls. He stared at the crumpled gallery. This is one of my favorites, Marisol said, pointing. That was supposed to be a vase of flowers, Ramon said, but it doesn't look like one. Well, it looks vase-ish, she exclaimed. Vase-ish? Ramon looked closer. Then he studied all the drawings on Marisol's walls and began to see them in a whole new way. They do look ish, he said. Ramon felt light and energized. Thinking ishly allowed his ideas to flow freely. He began to draw what he felt, loose lines, quickly springing out without worry. Ramon once again drew and drew the world around him. Making an ish drawing felt wonderful. He filled his journals, tree-ish, house-ish, boat-ish, afternoon-ish, fish-ish, sun-ish. Ramon realized he could draw ish feelings too. Peace-ish, silly-ish, excited-ish. His ish art inspired ish writing. He wasn't sure if he was writing poems, but he knew they were poem-ish. Here's a poem. Ponder. Pond, ponder. Dream yonder, pond, pond, yond, yond, gleam, wander. Ramon. One spring morning, Ramon had a wonderful feeling. It was a feeling that even ish words and ish drawings could not capture. He decided not to capture it. Instead, he simply savored it. And Ramon lived ishfully ever after.
True giving from the heart is an expression of love. Words from Kara Stein. I have seen these expressions of love demonstrated hundreds of times at our congregation when you share your time and talents in our church and in our communities. Our congregation is self-supporting, so it also relies on the generosity of our members and friends to share their treasure. This is the time when we do our offering and ask for that sharing. If you are able to share some of that treasure, please do so when the offering plate comes around. If you are with us online, please go to our website, fculittle.org, and click the yellow donate button, or you can send a check to the church to the attention of our assistant treasurer. This morning's offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation. Please join me in the words of our community response. The words will be on the screen. May we be transformed by our giving, and may the world be transformed by our giving.
Many weeks, this congregation shares a sacred time to feel again our deep connection to one another and to the holy. It is in this spirit that we share in lighting of candles of caring, candles of joy, concern, or sorrow. For those in the sanctuary, if you have an important joy or sorrow or concern that you'd like to share with this beloved congregation, please come up to the microphone. You can line up on both sides. Please let us know your name and let us know briefly how we might direct our thoughts, prayers, or healing wishes. And we can also bring a microphone to you where you sit after those have spoken. For those of you worshiping with us virtually, please raise your hand in the reactions area of Zoom if you'd like to speak, and we will call on you in turn. Are there any candles this morning? Would anyone like the microphone brought to them? Are there any candles from Zoom, Scott? No. Okay. We will light one additional candle to represent all the joys, concerns, and sorrows that are with us this morning, but that remain unspoken in the sanctuary of our hearts.
At this time, I invite you to join me for a moment of prayer and prayerful reflection and meditation. Spirit of love, we come together this morning grateful for this opportunity to reconnect, to rest for a time in the loving arms of this community, to revive our spirits, to reorient our hearts and our lives, to renew our commitment to live lovingly and to work for justice in the world. Amidst all of our sorrows and our joys, both personal and communal, may we find peace here this morning for a time. May we feel the presence of a love that will hold us and not let us go. May we be restored in our convictions that love will cast out fear and outlast hate. And may we find hope once again, stirring in the warm, dark, hidden depths of our own hearts. Please join me now for a time of sacred silence. Amen, and blessed be. The reading this morning that I've chosen, as I am wont to do, is a poem, this time by the New England poet Edna St. Vincent Millay. And it may be one of her lesser-known poems, but it jumped out at me these last couple of weeks. It is called Intention to Escape from Him. I think I will learn some beautiful language useless for commercial purposes. Work hard at that. I think I will learn the Latin name of every songbird, not only in America, but wherever they sing. Shun meditation, though. Invite the controversial. Is the world flat? Do bats eat cats? By digging hard, I might deflect that river, my mind, that uncontrollable thing, turgid and yellow, strong to overflow its banks in spring, carrying away bridges. A bed of pebbles now, through which there trickles one clear, narrow stream, following a course henceforth nefast. Dig, dig, and if I come to ledges, blast. Sort of an unusual poem to include in a worship service on this, 26th day of January. But I will try to explain myself and my choices. But first of all, I want to say it's nice to be back here with you again. I'm realizing that the last time that I was here was March 10th, more or less, of 2019. It was for Reverend Laura's installation. And I was here in this pulpit, and I was giving her a charge to her new ministry with you. How many of you were there for that? Yay! I told her that day that I was charging her to love the people. I told her that I was charging her to love herself and to take care of herself and to remain true to herself, to stay connected with colleagues, and to allow herself to be changed by this congregation for the good. How's she doing so far? Yay! Big shout out to Reverend Laura and to all of you. I know that you too have likely been changed by her presence among you, and hopefully, I expect it has been for the good. I've been thinking about what has happened since then, since that visit to your church almost 6 years ago. And it's really too much to try to recount. It's been a lot. A lot has happened in our society, in our own lives. But I'll just name a couple of things because they seem important. 9 days after that installation, my mother died, and she was just shy of her 90th birthday. And my family and I gathered to celebrate her life and to grieve her loss that summer. And then I returned for my second year as the interim minister at the church in Watertown, where I was then serving. And Laura started here in her second year with you. And it was that November of 2019 that China reported the first human case of COVID-19. It seems like a lifetime ago, in a way. And it was on January 20th of 2020, and I find this quite ironic, that date, January 20th, known as an inauguration date every 4 years. But it was 2020, January 20th, when the first US case was reported. A 35-year-old man who was traveling from China to his home in Washington State. And it was also on that very same day, January 20th of 2020, that Anthony Fauci announced that the NIH was already beginning to work on a COVID vaccine. And I mention all of that just to remind us a little bit of what we've been through in the last 6 years, a pandemic, personal losses and struggles, as well as some celebrations. But it's also personal to me, this mention of my mother, because she worked for almost 35 years in Building 10 of the National Institutes of Health, which is the clinical center, was in the news this week. So I've been thinking about her. And I've been thinking about how glad I was that she missed the COVID pandemic. I'm thinking about how proud she would have been of Anthony Fauci and his staff at the NIH. And I'm thinking about how roiling mad she would have been at so much of this week's news, including the administration's decision to halt grant panels, et cetera, at the NIH. I read an article this morning that talked about a researcher saying that he was unable to buy supplies like test tubes to continue his research there. And I could imagine instantly my mom exclaiming, "It's not just the research, it's patients, and it's their families. It's doctors and nurses and social workers who are trying to help care for people. It's about the people." And that's really what it comes down to, this whole week of policies and declarations and decisions are all about people getting hurt in a multitude of ways. And preachers telling their believers not to commit the sin of empathy. And elected leaders telling bishops to apologize for their message of mercy. It's been a hard week, has it not? How are you all doing? Some of you doing okay, some of you holding your own, some of you not doing okay, some of you struggling, some of our siblings really struggling, some of our neighbors really struggling. It's been a fire hose of bad news, which has felt familiar to me, if not more intense. They're flooding the zone, Steve Bannon said. It's shock and awe, right? It's all familiar, but more so. During the first Trump administration, I almost couldn't look away from the television or from the newspapers. Maybe some of you remember that feeling of always thinking you're going to miss the next thing if you turn away for even a moment, and you're going to get far behind. It was almost like a rat pressing on a lever, that intermittent reward system, that classic conditioning. We were just conditioned to keep checking the news. But there was a cost to that. There was a cost to that level of paying attention. There was a cost to that intensity of bad news and misinformation, and it was a kind of political burnout that many of us experienced. And so I will admit that after President Biden was elected, although I did not agree with everything that his administration did, I was one of those people who stopped checking in on the news so much. I was one of those people who stopped watching television so much. I felt like I was safe in doing that. I felt like nothing dramatic would happen that I wouldn't find out about later and be okay with. And now, since the election in November, I've found myself having to gear up to figure out how to face the next few years, knowing that I would want to be drawn into the news, to pay attention, to figure out moment by moment what was happening, knowing that there would be a cost to doing that, and knowing that I also wanted to pull away again. And so since the election in November, I keep reminding myself that they want me to be upset, and I keep working to prepare myself to not get upset. I've been trying to focus a little bit, that is to say, on self-care. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about self-care soon, but I just want to say that even in the last week, as I have been trying to maintain some habits that I'd begun to develop in December and the beginning part of January, I have found those habits kind of losing their grip on me, so to speak. I have been losing my ability to do the things that I committed to doing as I tune in more compulsively to the news. I am feeling this very real temptation to bury my head in the sand like the proverbial ostrich. I recently came across an essay written by a Presbyterian minister, one of my colleagues, Reverend Teresa Latini, who's the executive director at a conference and retreat center in Minnesota. And this was a piece that she wrote in 2022 about her own post-COVID pandemic depletion. She said, "I sometimes simply want to escape, say goodbye to the chaos, to the constant battering ram of COVID, to the doom and gloom of national and international politics. Tune it all out, turn it off, binge watch a new series from HBO or Netflix, get myself a pair of virtual reality goggles that will take me to a warm beach where someone hands me a cocktail, place my mind on anything entertaining and distracting for a little while." So I read that, and then I came across this poem that I shared with you as a reading from this book that I grew up with, The Collected Lyrics of Edna St. Vincent Millay. And I read this title, Intention to Escape from Him, and I thought about the upcoming inauguration. I don't know how many of you are familiar with St. Vincent's writings, but Vincent was what she was called by her family when she was growing up. She was born in Maine, February 22nd of 1892. She was a young woman who came of age during the Roaring Twenties in New York City. She was a feminist poet. She had relationships with men and with women. She was in an open marriage. She could well have written this poem that I shared with you about a lover that she wanted to forget, someone from whom she wanted to distract herself. But I also know about her that in 1931, when this poem was published originally, she was already becoming more and more of a political poet, not just a lyrical and romantic poet. In 1927, she published a poem called Justice Denied in Massachusetts. It was about the execution of Sacco and Vanzetti. Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti were, as you recall, Italian immigrants and anarchists who were convicted of killing two during an armed robbery in Braintree at a shoe factory. And this case garnered worldwide attention and lots of celebrity attention, and there were protests and there was advocacy, and it was widely believed that they were innocent and victims of the rampant anti-immigrant sentiment that was building in this country before World War II. Vincent was one of those poets who was among those who advocated on their behalf. She was, in fact, arrested for protesting in front of the State House to try to get their execution stayed. And she met with the Massachusetts governor, who was at the time Alvin Fuller, to appeal for clemency. And she followed up that meeting with a letter to him in which she wrote, "Which way would he have turned this Jesus of your faith? Oh, not the way in which your feet are set." Sacco and Vanzetti were executed a few days later at Charleston State Prison on August 23rd of 1927, and her poem, Justice Denied in Massachusetts, was published in the New York Times the day before the execution, and with its title, it carried the weight of a newspaper headline. One reviewer later noted with disdain her preoccupation with social justice, and that marked, for some, her fall from grace. That was a watershed moment for many on the left who were disheartened, who lost faith in the judicial system of their time, and who were losing faith in the efficacy of civil resistance. And I say all that just for context. Although this is probably a poem written about distracting herself from thoughts about an old flame or a potential new flame, in light of all of that I know about her, it did take on a different meaning for me when I reread it a few weeks ago. And I think, given her political inclinations, she may forgive me for this radical interpretation. But here's the poem again. Intention to escape from him. I think I will learn some beautiful language useless for commercial purposes. Work hard at that. I think I will learn the Latin name of every songbird, not only in America, but wherever they sing. Shun meditation, though. Invite the controversial. Is the world flat? Do bats eat cats? By digging hard, I might deflect that river, my mind, that uncontrollable thing, turgid and yellow, strong to overflow its banks in spring, carrying away bridges. A bed of pebbles now, through which there trickles one clear, narrow stream, following a course henceforth nefast. Dig, dig, and if I come to ledges, blast. I read this as a poem about the anxious mind, my anxious mind, and about self-care, or attempts at self-care. I could relate to this description of the turgid and yellow, uncontrollable river. That's been my mind sometimes when I get caught up in all of the anxiety, political or personal. The mind can either, as a river, be overflowing and overwhelming my banks, overwhelming me, like this fire hose of things that I have to react to every week, sometimes every day. Or my mind can be a narrow, focused stream following a nefast course, and nefast is an old word that means wicked, following a wicked course as I imagine worst-case scenarios and spin them out, overthinking about all the possible end games, where we're going. And I read this about this poem as about the poet trying to distract herself, right, from either this overwhelm or this narrow focus. And I laughed when I read it first because I, too, have been learning languages with no commercial purpose. Scots Gaelic has been one of mine, Welsh has been one of mine, and I have been learning obscure and trivial things that will be of no use to me whatsoever. What strikes me about this poem is that her mind, this uncontrollable river, is quite destructive. It's carrying away bridges, which makes me think of isolation and broken connections. And her response to this tumult is to dig and to blast all of these destructive and violent images. And so the poem got me thinking about how we take care of ourselves when we're stressed or anxious. Are we doing ourselves more good, or are we doing ourselves more harm? In the essay which I referred to earlier by the retreat leader, Teresa Latini, in Minnesota, she talks about her desire to escape from all the tumult of COVID, her desire to escape by entertaining and distracting herself by binge-watching Netflix. But she goes on to say that beyond these impulses, escapism takes worrisome forms. When it does, it erodes well-being, It diminishes physical, mental, and spiritual health. She mentions the overconsumption of alcohol and other types of substance abuse, and says these escapes can hinder one's capacity to overcome challenges or even face reality. She's talking here about maladaptive coping strategies. Adaptive coping strategies are problem-focused. They help us to eliminate a source of stress or change a stressful situation in some way. And emotional-focused coping strategies help us change how we react, help us adjust our emotional response. But so many other things that we think of often as coping strategies, ways that we distract ourselves, they neither help eliminate the source of our stress or change how we react. In fact, they are not only not helpful always, they can be harmful. Not only substance abuse, but also denial, anger, constant negative thoughts, the temptation to isolate ourselves. And so this is just an invitation to you this morning to think about how you cope with your own personal stressors, with your own anxieties, whether they're related to this administration that's 7 days old or to other things that are going on in your life. How have you been coping? How have you been caring for yourself these last few months? Reverend Latini says again, when I pause and listen to myself, I recognize that what I need is a retreat, not an escape. And she distinguishes between the two. Retreats may sound like escapes, they may sound like attempts to avoid an onslaught or to get away from danger, but she says they're two distinct things. An escape is running away, but a retreat is an intentional practice during which we slow down and try to reconnect with ourselves. We adapt new rhythms for the sake of being restored in body and mind and spirit. And so escape is burying our heads in the sand, isolating ourselves, cutting ourselves off, keeping ourselves busy, wearing ourselves down in new and commercially unimportant ways, where retreat is all about the R's, about rest and reorientation and renewal, reconnection, restoration, all of which help us to later re-engage. So what I'm trying to talk about this morning is how we care for ourselves and the ways in which our daily self-care practices and our weekly self-care practices mirror either escape or retreat. Timothy Snyder, in his wonderful little book on tyranny, which came out in 2017, tells us to be calm when the unthinkable arises. And I've found that advice so important, again, either in the political context or in the context of my personal life. That is my goal, to be calm when the unthinkable arrives. But in order to do that, we of course have to learn to manage and deal with our stress and anxiety. George Lakoff and Gil Durand came out with an article, an essay this week that they published on January 20th called "Here's What You Can Do to Keep Democracy Alive During Trump's Second Term." They said authoritarians thrive on fear and hopelessness, so it's crucial to avoid giving in completely to negative emotions. Be brave. Avoid helpless and hopeless talk. Authoritarians want you to be powerless because it makes their work easier. Cultivate empathy, they said, in order to resist dehumanization and demonization and division. Stay focused, they said. They will try to overwhelm you with constant attacks to keep you distracted and unbalanced. Take care of yourself, they said. Get plenty of sleep, drink lots of water, exercise. We are all in this together for the long haul. I find that a really comforting reminder, that last one. We're all in this together for the long haul. Because my creative mind, again, like I said, can imagine lots of different end games. But I'm trying to start this new year off differently, with a desire to be intentional about how I think, how I pay attention, how I take care of myself. Audre Lorde once said that self-care is a kind of political warfare. And so I'm thinking about self-care as self-compassion and resistance. There have been a number of things that I have tried to do. I make a list every year. These are the ways I'm going to take care of myself, all the healthy things. And there's a way in which I can pummel myself with this expectation that I will do it all, which is not self-compassionate at all. And so this year I've tried to focus. There are so many things I could do that are good for me, but this year I'm focused on running every day. And I just have to say, I hate running. I don't know how many of you are runners, but I hate it. I always have. I've always been self-conscious about my running, about how slowly I run, about how awkwardly I run. I run-ish. That's the best I can do, is run-ish. And I have to be mindful about it. But it's crazy. I have actually committed to running at least 1 mile every day, and so far in January I have done that. And I'm not mentioning this because I think it's good for anyone. In fact, I would discourage you from doing it. If there's any way you can avoid it, don't do it. But they tell me it's really good for me. And so I'm trying. And I'm trying while I do it to be both mindful and self-compassionate about it. So here's what I've learned, because part of why I'm doing it is it gets my mind a little cleared and things arise. And I've learned some lessons from running that I think might help me with my so-called resistance training for the coming years. And the first thing I've learned is that it is okay to go slowly. I have been more inspired in the last couple of weeks by people who tell stories of running very slowly than I have been by the stories of people who run fast. Either way, you're running the same distance, but you're doing it in a healthier, more compassionate way if that's what your body is telling you to do. Lesson number 2, it's better to take small steps than fewer big ones. Lots of small steps, lots of small actions add up to big change. I learned this the other day when I went out running on my typical mile course and felt so slow and so sluggish, but my playlist was keeping me pounding the pavement at a pretty quick cadence, and I ended up running a little bit faster than I had the day before. Lesson number 3, good music always helps. We need playlists to get through the next couple of years. And lesson 4 for me has been that it's important to build this habit, not just to do it when I feel like doing it, not just to resist when I feel like resisting, not to do it only when I feel brave or strong, but to try to do a little bit every day. The biggest lesson I've learned comes from a book which some of you may have read, and others of you may have read this elsewhere. But there is this thing, this theory called the endurance running hypothesis, or the persistence hunting hypothesis, which has said that humans evolved to run long distances. The reasoning behind it is that we were not necessarily bigger than our food sources, we were not stronger than our food sources, we were not faster or more powerful than our food sources, and of course I'm talking about primitive hunters. We didn't even have the tools that we needed to hunt for food. The evolutionary strategy that kept us alive and thriving was the adaptations in our body that keep us moving forward slowly and persistently to endure so that we can outlast the prey that we're seeking. So before I wrap this up, I just want to revisit this ostrich image. I've been talking to people who've been saying, oh, ostrich bearing head in sand, we don't want to do that, as tempting as it is. It's been tempting to me. I've learned recently that ostriches, I know ostriches get a pretty bad rap. We are told, the myth is, that they are so dumb that they bury their little heads in the sand hoping that the predators won't notice them and that danger will pass them by. But I learned about ostriches recently that What they're really doing, of course, is tending to nests that they build in the sand. And that when they stick their heads in the sand, it's not because, of course, they're trying to escape or because they're foolish or ignorant. They're actually tending to their eggs very carefully, turning them and keeping them warm and keeping them nourished. And so they're not a symbol of escape. They are a symbol instead for me now of renewal and of nurturing hope. And they are amazing endurance runners as well. Ostriches can run up to 50 miles per hour. They can sustain speeds of 30 miles per hour for 20 miles plus. It is estimated that an ostrich could run a marathon in 45 minutes. And so my final message to you is to be like an ostrich. Go ahead and stick your head in the sand when you need to from time to time, not as an escape, but as a retreat, to tend and to renew that life force which you are gathering and nurturing and protecting, to tend and renew and revive that hope, the strength, and then pick your head up and get moving. As George Lakoff and Gil Duran said, the road to preserving freedom and democracy will be long and challenging, but together we will keep resisting evil and cruelty and injustice and insisting on the inherent worth and dignity of every single person and on mercy, and we will outlast. We will outlast. Love is a long game, and love will win. I invite you to please join me now in singing our closing hymn, which is number 168 in the Great Hymnal, One More Step. I invite you to join with your neighbors, holding hands or touching elbows or whatever feels best to you, joined in community. One more song, one more prayer, one more word, one more step. The road ahead will be long and perilous, my friends. Let us walk it together unafraid, caring mightily for one another and for ourselves, knowing that together we are stronger than we will ever be alone, knowing that love is stronger than hate, and persisting and persisting. Go in peace and return again in peace. Amen.